Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roach Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, the North Carolina Tar Heels are more than likely going to miss the NCAA Tournament after losing to the Virginia Cavaliers in the ACC Tournament quarterfinals. I'm going to go over what I think went wrong for the North Carolina Tar Heels and what I think needs to happen in the future if they're going to get things back on track. Now, North Carolina, obviously, last year, people remember that they had a great season last year going to the national championship game, but the whole entire season wasn't like that. Even though they did make the tournament run that they did in March Madness, and it was an incredible run. Caleb Love hitting that shot against Duke to end Coach K's career, and overall, all those big games that Carolina had, they beat Baylor in the round of 32, and there were so many other big wins that they had as underdogs that no one thought that they were going to get the job done, and they even beat Duke in the last game of the regular season last year in Coach K's final home game, and overall, Carolina had a great run, but the whole season wasn't that way. They definitely struggled early on, and Carolina was on the bubble, and they almost missed the tournament last year because they were losing games that they shouldn't have lost to. They lost to Pittsburgh at home at one point, and that was a terrible loss, and a lot of people had Carolina in the last four in, but they got their act together. They beat Duke on Duke's senior night, and after that, Carolina just rolled and was starting to play at a high level, and they ended up getting an 8 seed in the NCAA Tournament, and like I said, they made it all the way to the national championship game, and a lot of people thought that Hubert Davis, it was just taking him a little while to get things figured out with his roster in his first season as the head coach, and finally things just started to click, and they started getting things rolling, and everything was going to be great for Carolina in the future. And when it was announced that every single starter off that team last year for North Carolina was coming back, besides Brady Manick, who didn't have any more time left because he was already a fifth-year senior, when Leaky Black, Armando Bacot, Caleb Love, and RJ Davis all announced they were coming back, Carolina instantly became the preseason #1 team in college basketball, and with good reason, because they went all the way to the title game with the team they had last year, and a lot of people thought that they could repeat this year, and they brought in Pete Nance, a really good transfer from Northwestern through the portal, and they also had a lot of freshmen that had a lot of potential like Seth Trimble and Jalen Washington, and they had the return of Puff Johnson as well, and things were looking really good for the Tar Heels, but this season has not gone anything like what people thought Carolina was going to be in the preseason. It all started early on when they were really struggling against Gardner-Webb and a lot of their other small non-conference opponents, and then they lost to Alabama in 4 overtimes, and they lost to Indiana on the road, and they just could not get anything going. Armando Bacot got banged up, and him not being healthy all season is part of the reason Carolina did struggle this season, to be fair. You could say if Carolina was healthy, it wouldn't have gone as bad as it has, but Bacot was banged up, and Puff Johnson was hurt throughout the season as well, but Puff Johnson never really played a big role for Carolina anyway, even when he was healthy, and he's really been struggling from 3, even though a lot of people do attribute that to his injuries. But another big issue for North Carolina is that Pete Nance did not replicate the success that Brady Manick had for the Tar Heels last year. Brady Manick was an elite shooter, and Pete Nance, while he has had his good games, he has not had the same high level of play that Brady Manick had game in and game out, and that's been part of the reason for North Carolina. So Bacot's injury, Pete Nance not having the same level of play of Brady Manick, and the biggest issue for North Carolina has been that Caleb Love and RJ Davis both were inconsistent for North Carolina last season, but then they both got hot in the NCAA Tournament, especially Caleb Love, but this season, especially Caleb Love, they have been so inconsistent. Caleb Love cannot make shots. He can get to the foul line, but he just cannot shoot threes, and RJ Davis has struggled as well, even though he's shooting a little bit better overall, but both guards for North Carolina have struggled. Leaky Black has improved as a corner three-point shooter, but it hasn't been enough to offset the worst production from North Carolina's 2 starting guards, and overall, you can kind of chalk it up that North Carolina could have been a bit of a fluke last year of just getting hot in the tournament at the end of the regular season, because again, if you look at North Carolina, they really struggled last year all season long, and they might have missed the tournament if they hadn't got things rolling at the end, but North Carolina this year, they never found their rhythm for a variety of reasons, and North Carolina is more than likely going to miss the NCAA Tournament, be the first team in college basketball history to be a preseason #1 team that misses the NCAA Tournament in the 64-team era. That is atrocious for North Carolina. With everybody back on their team, there's no way they should have missed the tournament, and a lot of people are putting the blame on Hubert Davis, and with good reason because he's the head coach, but is it all his fault? I think part of the reason is because Roy Williams ran a style of offense where they passed the ball, and there was a lot of up-tempo down the floor and getting the ball to the hoop, and they were so good at crashing the offensive glass and getting putbacks, and they were really good on defense and getting rebounds, but this North Carolina team does not have that fight on the defensive end of the floor, and you can attribute that partly to Hubert Davis not getting his team to play at a high level on defense, or part of it could just be the players. Once things went downhill, they just did not play as high of a level as they did last year. But overall, I just think if you look at Carolina's team, they're actually not built to be a great team. Even though they made the title game last year, again, it was because 2 guys got really hot hot, and Brady Manick was a better version of Pete Nance. In this year's team, you had an injured Armando Bacot, you had Pete Nance not living up to what Brady Manick did last year, and you had 2 guards for North Carolina that never got going, especially Caleb Love, and also the freshman never developed, which you could also attribute to Hubert Davis. He was not able to develop Seth Trimble or Jalen Washington or any of the other freshmen that they had, and Puff Johnson was injured as well, and that leaves you with a roster full of players that all have flaws, and North Carolina ran a system of offense that was all isolation ball, trying to get RJ Davis and Caleb Love to create shots on their own, and you need to pass the ball. Roy Williams would have never let that happen. They would have passed the ball to their teammates and shared it all over the floor, and they would have gotten much more high-quality looks besides Caleb Love and RJ Davis chunking up threes that most players would never hit unless you're Stephon Curry. And overall, if you look at North Carolina, that is on Hubert Davis because he's running a system of offense that does not work with the players that he has unless they're hitting shots like they were last year. So even though it is a shock to see North Carolina more than likely going to miss the NCAA tournament, if you really look into it, North Carolina was not a very good team last year. They just got hot going into the NCAA tournament because Caleb Love and RJ Davis made ridiculous shots, and this year that just did not happen. And plus, again, they did not have Brady Manick as well. They had Pete Nance that was struggling from 3. So Carolina has a roster full of players that are not built to run the offense that Hubert Davis has them play. They don't play hard enough on both sides of the ball. Their defensive statistics are way worse than they were under the Roy Williams era. They don't crash the glass. They don't defend at as high of a level. And on the offensive end, they don't run the floor and get up-tempo baskets like they did under the Roy Williams era. They're not crashing the offensive glass, and sometimes they just look disinterested on the floor, even though I'm not saying they're not playing hard. But Carolina has a lot of talent. They have NBA-level players, but they just don't run a good system of offense. They don't play at a high enough level all the time, and Hubert Davis is going to have to find a way next season, especially if some of these players return for North Carolina next year, to run a different style of offense that's more like the Roy Williams style of offense, because if he does not, then Hubert Davis is going to have the same results they had this season. They're not going to win anymore, and then it's going to more and more show that that tournament run was a fluke based off of players that were just hitting a lot of shots, and they were not able to replicate it this past season. And if North Carolina is not able to get this turned around, then Hubert Davis might not have a job at North Carolina in a couple of years, and North Carolina could start going downhill if they can't hire a good coach in the future. But I'm not ready to hang it up with Hubert Davis. I think he can get things turned around, but he's going to have to realize the flaws of his team, and he's going to have to find a way to get North Carolina playing the brand and style of basketball that they had in the past, especially with the players that he has that are not able to play the style of offense that they're playing currently. But again, for the North Carolina Tar Heels, it's really unfortunate that they're going to be the first preseason #1 team to miss the NCAA tournament more than likely in the 64-team tournament era ever. But overall, it's not really a shock to me because North Carolina is a basketball team that's severely flawed. They had a great tournament run last year, but it was again based off of players just hitting a lot of shots, and they kind of got a little bit of luck on their side that they did, because if they didn't start making shots last year, then North Carolina would have been an NIT team just like this year, because again, North Carolina is just not a team playing at a high level right now. They don't take good shots. They don't share the basketball. They don't play at a high level on both ends of the floor, and Hubert Davis is going to have to find a way next year, if he has the same players on this team, to be able to get things turned around and to be able to play a better style of offense, or North Carolina is going to continue to struggle, and they might be making more NITs than NCAA tournaments in the years to come. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about North Carolina basketball this year, why you think things went wrong, and whether you think Hubert Davis can turn North Carolina around the next couple of seasons. Follow me on Twitter as well, and I will see you next time.